Here with Dave Hayes, praying medic. And Dave, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining. Anything you want to say about yourself and your background before we get started?
Nothing in particular other than I am an avid Q researcher and Q decoder, former atheist. Now I see people healed through the power of God. And I love my wife. Hey, baby, we're live.
Nice. Well, I just wanted you to know that you're one of the reasons why I got into what I'm doing now, because I was following you as you were kind of interpreting the posts for me for a long time as I was watching your YouTube channel. So thank you for just putting the information out there. It really makes a big difference. And now I'm doing my channel kind of, based on that as well.
Cool. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
thanks. It's an honor to be able to inspire people to do their own thing.
And it's a really exciting time in the world of Q, because I remember a few years back when, we thought maybe Christmas time, everyone's going to Gitmo and nothing happens. And maybe not nothing happens, but the big things don't happen right in front of our face. We hear things like maybe there are mass arrests happening in Saudi Arabia, but it doesn't feel close to home. It doesn't feel like Hillary and the Clintons and the Obamas are getting the justice they deserve. But now we have COVID-19 and the riots, and things are happening, and Q's been silent the last couple of days. Any thoughts or things you want to share related to what I just said?
Oh my gosh. Well, personally think Q is silent because he knows I have to work on my next book. So uh, I wish I could just say, hey, Q, time out. I got to work on a book. So take a week off. Yeah. So we've got the pandemic that came in. And before that, there was the impeachment. And after the pandemic, now we've got the rioting and the peaceful protests that burn cities to the ground. Um, as I look at all of those things happening, it from a strategic standpoint, I tend to look at these things. I try to analyze them from a big picture, 40,000 foot view as much as I can. Q has been pretty generous about giving us some glimpses at the 40,000 foot view, the people that are in control at the very top level. And what I see happening, I know a lot of people are just, I hate to say this, but I'm going to say this. Some people are in this just for the arrests. That's all they want. They just want to see people arrested.
Vengeance.
Nothing else. And to those people, I would say, you're entitled to whatever you want. You can be in this for whatever you want. It's your motives. I think it's absolutely the wrong reason to be in this. And I've done a lot of thinking about the whole, why are we actually doing this? What's the purpose of this movement? And from my perspective, it's not about arrests. It isn't. We thought it was initially. People who got on board with Q in the first 6 months, we were anticipating there was going to be a bunch of people arrested relatively quickly, and that didn't happen. And Q is dropping clues along the way that this was kind of indicating that this is going to be a much longer operation, a much more involved operation, not just the takedown of some corrupt people in Saudi Arabia and then the arrest of some politicians in the US. It's much bigger than that. It's a global operation. Q started talking about what happened in Saudi Arabia will happen in the United States, and then the UK and Europe and Asia. And it's going to take a long time. It's a removal of corruption on a global scale. It's a removal of the global deep state. And that is, when you talk about removing the deep state, which is influencing and controlling society to a large degree, it's not simply just arresting a bunch of people.
You can't just cut the head off the snake. There's actually a very
Yeah,
intricate mechanism in place in all of our institutions.
There is. If you look at Hollywood, if you look at, the Ivy League colleges, if you look at the Catholic Church, you look at Congress, law enforcement agencies, FBI, Department of Justice, military, there's a structure. There is laws that are written into the fabric of our society. Congress has passed a lot of laws that actually permit corruption to exist and to propagate. And
Yeah.
we have to change the institutions. That's the thing that people don't want to get real with is, just arresting some people isn't, it might make you feel good. Hey, we got some arrests. Did you see they got perp walked on CNN and they got taken out of jail and now they're going to Gitmo? That's going to happen. It is going to happen, but that's not the ultimate solution. And Q has been kind of showing us what the ultimate solution is. And that is, it's a great awakening. And President Trump tweeted it this morning. He tweets out, what does he tweet out?
The great reawakening of America.
A reawakening, right? The American reawakening. And it is about this whole operation is really mostly about making the average person aware of the realities of corruption and how it has infiltrated most of our societal institutions. And that's an information campaign. That's not arrests. That's not arresting a bunch of criminal people. That is people like you and me doing shows and providing information about corruption to average people and having them wake up and having them realize, oh my gosh, we've been lied to this whole time. They've been stealing our money. They've been trafficking kids. They've been flaunting the law. They've been writing laws that allow them to surveil us illegally. That's another whole part of the process is we live in a surveillance state where a lot of big tech companies and the government have been surveilling us basically in violation of the Fourth Amendment for a long time. And people, average people like us, have to get fed up and get to a point where we are going to exercise our will and make a conscious decision to retake our government back from the evil people that have been controlling it for the last 200 years. That's the reawakening. The Great Awakening is, Q's been talking lately about only at the precipice, right?
Right. People have to be showed. They have to be showed something. They can't you can't just tell someone something. You have to show them. So that's this. There's this conflict going on where some people who are in our movement or just people in general, they see the news, the mainstream media, the Hollywood people, and they think it looks like we're losing. They think that the narrative's really being controlled, but actually that's a minority. Actually, the majority of people, and even in the CNN and all the fake polls, they say that most people are not in favor of defunding the police, for example. So that's not a popular opinion, but that is being spouted out there in the mainstream narrative. So what do you have to say to the people in the Q movement in particular who feel like we're losing just because they're looking in those directions of Hollywood and the mainstream media?
Yep.
And how is this going to change? Like, what does it mean when Q says we are the news now? And what kind of events can take place that really flip the tables on that whole narrative in 1 second?
Yeah, good questions. So we know from history that the mainstream media likes to create fake polls. They did it in 2016 when they kept putting out all these polls saying that Hillary was going to beat Donald Trump and it was going to be a big victory. And she had a huge lead. And even in red states, she was going to flip some red states blue, right?
Like predictive programming.
Yeah, people have to understand that the press is their existence serves a purpose of mentally programming us for an expected outcome, right? So when you read these polls that say Joe Biden has a 16% lead over Donald Trump, all right, I watch social media. I'm in touch with people around the country and around the world, and let me ask you this: if there are polls out there that are also saying that 30 to 40% of registered Democrat voters want a different candidate other than Joe Biden, there's no way that you can tell me that there's legitimately Biden has a 16 or 18% lead over Trump. It's impossible. A lot of the Democratic base is fed up with Joe Biden. They think he's incompetent. They think he's senile. He has no message. He is an old, doddering
Racist.
fool. He's probably more senile than Robert Mueller, and that's pretty hard to say. Uh, so Biden, when you see these polls, I get messages from people on Twitter. Oh, have you seen this poll? I'm worried. I think Trump's going to lose. Biden's in the lead. And like, people are still not picking up on the fact that the media is gaslighting us. They're putting out these polls to fake us out, to make us think that Biden is going to win. And unfortunately, it's working with a lot of people. A lot of people still go to the Fox News polls, and Fox News polls are some of the worst. They're rigged. They're absolutely untrue. And the media is putting out this message that Trump is losing, and it's sinking into the minds of a lot of people. It's programming them. It's taken away their hope. It's taken away their belief that we're going to win. And that's what the media is trying to do. They're trying to break your will, and they're trying to break your confidence in the fact that Trump has a winning economy. He's rebuilt the stock market, rebuilding jobs. The latest jobs report from last week was amazing. He is going to restore and fix all the broken things that mainstream media and the tech companies have destroyed. And so one of the things you have to kind of get into your mind is the fact that the mainstream media is your enemy. They're your enemy. Now, I read reports from Washington Post, New York Times, all the mainstream sources, LA Times. I read their news, I read the reports for whatever factual information is in those reports. And then I observe all of their bias, the dishonesty, the way that they shade stories certain ways, the way they omit certain important facts. I take the information that they give me, I consider their bias and their dishonesty. And I read a lot of different sources. I read a lot of reports from people on Twitter, people that I follow on Twitter who are good, objective, either commentators or providers of information. It's Q says information warfare, right? So we have to understand that the media complex is using information against us. Washington, D.C., corrupt politicians are using information against us. They're programming us. And when Q says you are the news now, he's not joking. So if you take, let's say, 5 accounts on Twitter, people who have a pretty decent following who are reporting on Q's message and reporting on what the president is doing. Say me, In the Matrix, Lisa May, maybe In Pursuit of Truth, and pick whatever 5 people you want. Collectively, the 5 of us have more engagement, more views, more eyes on than any 3 or 4 networks combined on social media. And the fact is, most people get their information from social media. They're not watching broadcast news. They get their information from Twitter and Reddit and YouTube and Facebook. And we are massively winning the war on social media. Q influencers, I'm not going to tell you what my engagement rates are. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. But I have way more engagement on my Twitter page than CNN or MSNBC or CBS or any other network. I have way more engagement than any of them do, probably most of them combined. That's not counting my YouTube channel. And then you look at all the other people who have YouTube channels and who have presence on other platforms like Instagram. We are absolutely killing the media with our messaging on social media. They can't compete with us. I mean, you look at the engagement that some of these networks get. And even like CBS, they put out some kind of a news article or a video, whatever, and they'll be lucky to get 120 likes on something. Most of us are getting thousands of likes and shares on our posts. So that's what General Flynn said. He said, look, they dishonored their profession as journalists, and we picked up the baton and we took over social media. We took over the news. We became the news through social media.
It's like a vacuum of trust. And so we just filled that vacuum.
Yeah,
with reliability.
Exactly. People stopped trusting the media because they realized they were being lied to. Then they had to start looking around for who they can trust. And, anyone on social media who puts out a good message, who's consistent, who reports accurately and can be trusted will have an audience. They'll have a following.
And so there's been an executive order recently to remove some of the liability protections for big tech, people like Twitter. The Twitter has gotten really bold, started to editorialize the president's tweets. You have been kicked off of Facebook, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, and so a lot of people are wondering, hey, why did the White Hats let these big tech giants uh, take it this far? Why did they let the mainstream media take it this far? Don't we have enough dirt on some of these people that they should be in jail right now, or they should have been sued out the wazoo? Why do you think the White Hats have taken this strategy of allowing these big tech giants and the mainstream media to have this semblance or seemingly have a sense of control and sense of protection and a sense of safety, when in reality, at any moment, perhaps a hammer could drop? Do you think it's all going to happen at once? What is Operation Q waiting for here?
Well, Q said, and this was last year, 2019, I think there's also some posts from 2018, where Q said that, and it was a question and answer session. It was the first time I remember Q talking about it. And Anon asked Q, hey, are we going to have free speech on these, public platforms? And Q said 100% they're going to be regulated. Some social media platforms will collapse under the weight of their own corruption. So, and then later on, I think 4 or 5 months later, Q said that you have to give social media platforms enough room, and you have to allow them to break the law. You have to allow them to go a little bit too far in censorship. It has to become obvious to the average person that social media platforms are gaming the system. They're trying to suppress certain viewpoints. The evidence, not just from a legal perspective, not just from the DOJ prosecuting them or the FCC creating regulations, but it has to become obvious to the people, average people out there on social media. They have to see what's going on, and they have to agree with Trump's decision to step in and create regulations and possibly have the DOJ investigate the tech companies. So it's been allowed to go this far so that there's enough evidence, both from a criminal perspective, regulatory perspective, but also in the mind of the public. And when Twitter started slapping these labels on Trump's tweets, trying to fact check him, Trump was like, okay, well, now we have a publicly visible issue. It's in the headlines, news is reporting on it, everybody's aware of it. And now Trump has some ammunition that he can use to then go to the FCC, start the regulation process, go to the DOJ. And the thing with the Department of Justice, Barr has personally been overseeing the investigation of antitrust, anti-competitive practices, and some other things regarding Facebook and Google and big tech. Barr has been personally running those investigations. The criminal investigation is already underway. He's coordinating with the FCC and the FTC, right? So the government agencies, the regulatory agencies are working with the DOJ. They've got task forces out that are looking into all these issues. And, to think that nothing's happening, well, is not true. I mean, you go to my YouTube channel and all my Q videos have the little Wikipedia thing slapped underneath them. Q is a far right conspiracy theory, right? It's the same thing they're doing to Trump. And I could go to court, and I might. I'm actually thinking about talking to the U.S. attorney here in Phoenix and having them file a criminal complaint against YouTube for putting, basically censoring and editorializing my YouTube videos. There is a possibility, but I'll be talking to the U.S. Attorney's Office about my Facebook situation. They suspended my account simply because I was posting Q videos and for no other reason. Right. And they gave me no redress, no ability to appeal or anything. So there's I could hire an attorney and sue them, or I could just turn it over to the U.S. Attorney's Office and let them prosecute. and that may be the route that I'm going to go. You know, we have, now that Trump has done this with this executive order, the department and the people who turned in their complaints when Trump put out those the requests for information about people who are being censored on social media. That executive order said that those complaints were going to be turned over to the Justice Department, and they're going to be prosecuting them. So I'm encouraged. I think things are moving in the right direction. There's still a battle, and until November, till the election, the battle is going to intensify.
Yeah, I am wondering about the timing. But first, I wanted to discuss the riots and George Floyd, and I just wanted to give it some context with this whole idea of Jussie Smollett. This is a guy who in Chicago was a Hollywood guy, you know, trying to frame this whole kind of mainstream media narrative that Trump supporters are, you know, anti-gay and anti-black and all of this stuff. And it turned out to be a complete farce. You know, and Michelle Obama seemed to be aiding and abetting him, kind of getting out of that pickle that he was in. The media never really fully apologized and fully retracted. And at the same time, you had two Congress people who were running for president, actually, to have an anti-lynching law to be passed at the same time. So there seemed to be a coordination between the Obamas, mainstream media, Hollywood, and Congress at the same time. And now there's a federal investigation into Jussie Smollett. And now we have the George Floyd situation. And Q recently posted what seemed to be an implication that the Obama Foundation was preparing a picture of George Floyd before he even died. So I just wanted to bring all of that context there, just because there are so many inconsistencies with the George Floyd death. And it seems to just be the kind of thing that the deep state would do because they want to have control over a narrative. All the things like the "I can't breathe" meme and the anti-lynching law that's surfacing again, and all this stuff that they're doing. So I was just wondering if I could get your perspective on the George Floyd situation. I know it's a can of worms, but anything you wanted to express about how I provided context for that?
Hey, honey, you want to take over?
No.
I'm just kidding. To be honest, I'm not the expert on the George Floyd situation. I haven't even watched the video of George Floyd, his takedown with the cop, because I'm trying to shield myself from that kind of stuff. I've seen enough violence in my lifetime. I don't need to see any more. When I'm scrolling through Twitter and I see people are posting these videos with moms beating their children or kids getting beat on the bus, I flip right past them and I don't watch them. Yeah. So I haven't watched that video. I have been inundated with messages from people saying, none of this adds up. The license plate on the cop car, the number on the cop car, the guys don't look the same. The one that was arrested and the one that was doing all this stuff. I mean, I've been inundated with people making observations about how nothing seems to add up. It looks like it was a contrived situation. I have not investigated it, and I'm not going to.
How about the overall? Sorry, I'll let you finish. Go ahead.
No, I will say this. I haven't looked into the details of what the officer did to George Floyd. You know, there's all these theories that George Floyd's still alive and all that stuff. It's a rabbit hole I'm not going down. But I will say this about the larger societal phenomenon that came in the wake of George Floyd's death, and that was the protests and riots. That was completely manufactured. They were waiting, and I suspect with a lot of these, with a lot of the mass shootings and a lot of the minority deaths and things of that nature, they are, you know, it's really strange because there's so many people killed in Chicago every day, much less every weekend. I think there was something like 75 people shot in Chicago last weekend. Media says nothing about it. Why does the media not care about the fact that, you know, 70 or 80 people a weekend are dying in Chicago? Mostly minorities. They don't care, right? They care about their issue, which is, you know, an issue like George Floyd. And then they magnify that police brutality. They start to spin this narrative that all cops are bad. And now that leads to the movement to let's defund the police. Um, and you have the protests and the riots. This is all organized. This is all George Soros and his community organization. I mean, what was Obama before he was president? He was a community organizer. And people like Obama doing the community organizing, getting all these activities put out, recruiting people, getting them out to do the protesting. I think that is all astroturf. I think it's all, there's very little of that was organic. I think most of it's been manufactured.
Yeah.
And Antifa, violent rioting, definitely manufactured. A lot of those people are being paid to do what they're doing. Their expenses are paid. Pallets of bricks showing up so they can do the rioting. That whole thing is contrived, and anyone with an objective viewpoint and two brain cells can probably figure that out. So what's again 40,000 foot view? What's a larger narrative? Well, every year prior to the presidential election, Black Lives Matter seems to just pop up as an issue. Racial tensions get stoked, and you have all these people. You have mainly you have the mainstream media pushing this narrative that Black people are oppressed, that white people are evil, that Republicans are evil, that law enforcement is evil, and that's the narrative that they push. I mean, you can go look at all the studies, research that has been done on law enforcement violence, on breakdowns by minority, by race, whatever, and there's no evidence at all to suggest that police are more violent toward Blacks than whites or Hispanics or any other group. Just the evidence doesn't support that conclusion. Yet the mainstream media will will push that narrative, and they're pushing it and they're pushing it and they're pushing it. And I listened to these interviews with Attorney General Barr and Trump and Kayleigh McEnany, and the media continually pushes this peaceful protests. Forget about the fact that some of these cities have just been burned to the ground, national monuments destroyed and defaced. But the media keeps pushing peaceful protests, and they refuse to acknowledge that there was any violence, refuse to admit that there was any culpability on the part of the protesters. Everything that Barr and Trump did was unwarranted in their minds, and they keep pushing that narrative to try to convince the public that Trump and Barr are a bunch of oppressive white supremacists. That's their narrative, and they have to push that because they have no other narrative to go with. They tried the Mueller investigation. It didn't get rid of Trump. They tried the impeachment. It didn't get rid of Trump. They tried the pandemic, wanted to destroy the economy, destroy the stock market. It didn't work. Jobs are coming back. The stock market's coming back. They're desperate. The deep state is desperate at this point. And that's the take-home point from all of this is all of these ridiculous narratives that are being pushed. Let's defund the police department. Let's get rid of our police department, and let's have no police, right? They're openly advocating anarchy, right? That is how desperate the deep state has become. This is maybe has always been their agenda. Let's not have law enforcement. I don't know. It's just crazy. But that tells you how desperate the corrupt politicians in the deep state are. They're now pushing, let's get rid of police. And what they're doing is they're forcing people to that precipice. They're forcing society to the precipice. The society is going to have to look in the mirror, look at what those people are saying and go, do we really want to go in this direction? Get rid of our police department? What next? What are we going to get rid of next? These people that are pushing this stuff, they're insane. They're like, they've lost their marbles. Society as a whole is waking up because the deep state is pulling some really stupid tricks, and they're pushing ridiculous narratives. And the people are not as stupid as a lot of us believe. The population is going to wake up. They're waking up already. And you can see that in recent Rasmussen poll that came out. It said that Black support for Trump is up to 40%, right? It was, it just keeps going. The more the media push these fake racial narratives, the more Black people and Hispanics are waking up to the truth that Trump is actually doing more for them than any other president in recent history.
Right. So are you saying that the same strategy for social media that we talked about, where people really have to see how bad it is and they really have
Yeah.
to step over that legal line, the same deal with the rioting
Mm-hmm.
and so forth? Okay.
People in Minneapolis are looking at a burned out ghetto of a city now, and they are being shown what Democrat leadership is going to give them if they reelect those people. Your city is going to be a war zone. People are going to be killed. They're going to allow looting, burning, and rioting. If you want to live in that type of environment, reelect your Democrat mayor and your city council. If you don't want that to be your future, then you better start rethinking this. And that is the dilemma that America is facing.
It is very disconcerting, though, to see a bunch of people who seem like lemmings. They're all repeating, chanting the phrase, I can't breathe. They're all taking a knee. And these kind of contrived memes that are, they're reinforcing a sense of, I don't have sovereignty. I'm apologizing for my own existence. I give up my sovereignty, give it to authority, but it's not an authority like a legitimate authority. It's just the mob or to my so-called people I was oppressing or whatever. And so I wanted to get your perspective on kind of the spiritual side or the overarching principles, where you have the left with the I can't breathe chants and then kneeling down. The kneeling thing is to me, is very important, because I would never kneel before any man. I only kneel for God. And they're also saying that you shouldn't sing when you're at church. You shouldn't even go to church, but if you do go to church, don't praise God. Don't open your mouth and praise God, because you might spread coronavirus. And also, the Planned Parenthood is staying open during the shutdown. So can you just give me your perspective on a spiritual basis, or maybe on a psychological warfare basis, why these particular kind of memes are happening?
Yep. How many people do you think are out of the entire American population? How many people do you think are openly endorsing the meme, I can't breathe? Percentage of the
Um,
population.
I don't know, maybe a very, very small percentage, but there are people in my own
Very, very
Facebook
small.
network, my own immediate family, who would be included in there.
Right. It's a very small percentage. It's, I'm sure, less than 10% of the population, probably less than 5%. And even the ones who are like retweeting and resharing that stuff on social media wouldn't do it in public. And so it's a very small cross section of the population. And what the media is doing is trying to make us think that it's the majority of the population. So they put it on the news, CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News. They put it out there. They show people sharing it on social media, doing it, at malls and wherever, and they in the streets and all this stuff. And they're creating the impression that this is a majority of people who think this way. It's what the media has been doing forever, trying to get us to think that we're in the minority and those people are the majority. And it's actually, those people are a very small minority.
But they chose the phrase "I can't breathe," and they want people to wear masks. It all seems
Right,
related.
right, right. And it's all interconnected. So the, let me just give you an illustration. This is an illustration from Brendan Dilley. I'm going to steal it and kind of customize it a little bit, give it a paint job and put some headers on it and fuzzy dice. So Brendan Dilley described the left's movement this way. This is how he described it. Over the last 30 or 40 or 50, 60 years, progressivism has sought to incrementally move their agenda forward by little eroding constitutional rights, right? So just start with gun rights. They have eroded, magazine capacities, and they got the fully automatic ban on assault rifles, and they've been incrementally encroaching on the Second Amendment over the course of years. Every year comes by, another state passes, California, I think a couple of years ago, 10 round magazine capacity max for semi-auto handguns. So abortion. You have Roe versus Wade, and then incrementally over the following 35, 40 years, abortion has been made easier, it has been made more available, and they have moved the date at which you can do an abortion up until recently now, where they're basically advocating full-term abortion. Okay, the incrementalism is pervasive in everything that the left has been trying to do. They've been telling us 20, 30 years ago, we're not for full-term abortion. Are you crazy? That's not what we're about at all. Actually, they were, but they had to slowly move the conversation. They had to gaslight the American public into thinking that that was okay. And you can only do that in small incremental moves. So take socialism. 25, 30 years ago, most Democrats would never have embraced socialism. What they do is gradually moving more and more socialist issues into the public thought stream consciousness, bringing in socialist programs into schools, into academia. You infiltrate higher levels of academia, and you have a lot of socialist professors who are pushing Marxism, Leninism, and every other socialist idea, to the point where a lot of our kids coming out of school are basically Marxists, right? Slowly eroding the fabric of society and moving everything farther left, incrementally. So it's like climbing up a mountain, right? To climb a 15,000 foot mountain, you have to just step by step, little by little, make your way up the trail till you get to the top of the mountain. The Democrats and the liberals and the progressives had just about gotten to the top of the mountain. If Hillary Clinton would have gotten elected, they would have got to the top of the mountain, and they would be able to force their hard left agenda on everybody. Full-term abortions for everybody, Planned Parenthood for everybody. They would probably start closing down churches and just destroying everything that conservatism is about. Pack the Supreme Court, change a lot of laws, reverse a lot of decisions. It would be terrible if Hillary would have been elected. But Donald Trump was elected. And Trump is the anti-establishment candidate that no one expected. And Trump immediately began to reverse all the incremental wins that the left has been putting over on us for the last 25 or 30 years. So Trump takes a strong stand on Second Amendment, has been talking about national reciprocity for concealed carry of all things, right? So all the wins that they've had over the last 20 or 30 years are now threatened by Trump. He's anti-abortion. He is anti-socialist, right? Any of the if Jeb Bush or Mitt Romney or any of those freaking globalist shills would have been elected president, they would have went right along with the progressive agenda. But Trump stood there at the top of the mountain and kicked them down the mountain, and they lost 20 or 30 years of progress that they had gained incrementally. Now they do not have the luxury of trying to incrementally get all that back over the next 20 or 30 years.
It's now or never. It's like end game.
4 years from the time Trump got elected. Because if Trump was to get reelected, he would have 8 years, 2 terms. He would radically change the Supreme Court, overturn Roe versus Wade, go back to a lot of laws that the way they were back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. He is going to make wholesale changes to the way America is run. So the left realized we're in panic mode now. We don't have 20 or 30 years. We have got to push these issues full bore now, which is why Governor Northam came out and started talking about full-term abortion and afterbirth. Oh, the
Post-birth,
baby, you
yeah.
make the baby comfortable, and then you have a discussion about how you're going to kill your child after it's been born, right? That discussion would have been rejected by everybody 35 or 40 years ago. But now the left has been trying to they've been brainwashing society into thinking that killing a baby after it's born is actually somehow okay. And the New Green Deal. What is a New Green Deal all about? It is about absolute full-on total socialism, get rid of all fossil fuels, all internal combustion engines, get rid of it all, tax everybody to 90%, have this big, massive, bloated government where corrupt politicians can just squeeze us dry and take all of our money, right? It's socialism on steroids. And it never would have even been given any serious consideration 35 years ago. But now that they've been incrementally programming people to think that this is somehow normal, they're pushing it. They're going full on socialism. So everything that we're seeing now from the left, defunding police, the entire leftist handbook is now laid open because they've only got about 5 months to convince the entire American population that their entire playbook is open. We want abortions after the baby is born. We want to take away your guns, Buttigieg, and all those other knucklehead lefty who are pushing in the Democrat debates. Hell yeah, I'm taking away your AR-15s. We're taking away all your damn guns. Joe Biden, he'd get rid of everybody's guns in a minute because that's what the deep state would tell him to do. So they're pushing everything in your face right now because they've only got 5 months. And if they lose seats in Congress and if they lose the November election, their entire agenda is wiped out for at least a generation. Because what's going to happen is when Trump is reelected in November, we're going to start having indictments. Political operatives in FBI, DOJ, under Obama's White House, people in the CIA, the indictments are going to start being unsealed. And then the corruption of Obama's administration is going to be exposed. And a lot of those people are going to end up at Gitmo. Some of them may end up facing capital punishment. Now,
so you're saying indictments post 11/3. You're not. What about before the election?
I think the indictments will come after the election. We may see some indictments before the election. Keo has hinted, we're preparing an October surprise, being prepped and warm. I don't know if that's indictments. I'm not sure what it is. But Durham's investigation is pretty well close to wrapping up. And, we've been told sometime maybe summer, late summer into the fall, Durham's investigation will be done. I'm not going to suggest that people take that as scripture because DOJ timelines are notoriously inaccurate. We were told we would get the FISA report from the Inspector General. It actually showed up 11 months after they told us it was going to be ready. So
that certainly throws the deep state off as well.
Yeah. So I'm not suggesting that people should get their hopes up that Durham's investigation is going to be over, by September or October. It may not be, but I think we're going to see some indictments relatively soon. I suspect the first ones are going to be related to General Flynn, the surveillance of Flynn. As soon as the Emmett Sullivan dismisses Flynn's case, that kind of opens a door for Flynn to start talking publicly. And it also kind of would make sense if I was a U.S. attorney that I would start unsealing indictments in people who illegally spied on Flynn, who leaked the transcript of his phone calls, all that, start exposing the corruption in the Obama administration. So what we have coming up is in the next year, when Trump wins in November, and he will, and he's going to get all the special elections that have been held so far California District 25, Wisconsin, all the ones in Virginia, all Republicans. They've flipped a bunch of blue seats red. And you're going to see more of that. I think in the fall, we're going to see a lot of blue seats flipping red. People are fed up with what we had under Obama. They like Trump. They like the economy. They like the jobs. They like knowing that Trump, if nothing else, you may not like Trump personally, but the dude knows how to supercharge the economy. And people really like that. So I think that Trump is going to get, I think there's going to be a red wave this year. People were expecting it in 2018. I don't know that we should have expected it, but Trump has been able to prove that he's the guy. He shed the Mueller investigation and all the allegations of corruption and the impeachment crap. A lot of people see through that. So I think between now and November, the deep state is going to pull out all the stops. They're going to do even crazier stuff than we've already seen so far. The insane leftist agenda is going to be exposed even more. They're going to be pulling out more of their playbook and shoving it in people's throats and trying to force America to adopt their evil globalist agenda. It's going to get a bit crazy, I think, between now and November. I believe that the deep state has a plan, and they're running their plan. I believe the White Hats and the intelligence community and military people that are supporting Trump, they've also got a plan, and they are running their plan. And I think that the people who are supporting Trump have a much better plan. They've also have access to better information than the deep state does. Deep state is massively outgunned and outmanned, and they're kind of cornered. They're desperate. And you can see all this insanity with the rioting and the protesting and, Nancy Pelosi and all these knuckleheads in Congress doing this kneeling crap, pandering. They're pandering for votes. They're pandering to try one last Hail Mary to appeal to minorities in America. It's not going to work. I saw on Twitter a lot of black people just scorching members of Congress for their little kneeling trick, which didn't really fool a whole lot of people. So that's kind of what I see happening over the next 6, 7, 8 months. I think the deep state is desperate. Leftist political operatives are desperate. They're going to be pulling out more and more crazy stuff out of their hat. And
like mass shooting events, baiting us into wars with foreign countries and things like that.
And by the way, I talked to you a little bit before the show. I think the recent drop, I think it was Friday, the EAM loyalists, and then there was Red 1, Red 2, Red 3, Red 4, Red 5. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that post, and what that post was for was it was signaling to a couple of groups of people. It was signaling to people in the military who are loyal to the president and telling them, this is our operational plan. If they try to do this, we're going to do this. If they try to do this, this is going to be our response. If they do that, this is how we respond. So Q was telling the White Hats what the order of operations would be as the deep state tries to do more and more things to stop Trump.
Right. The
other thing that Q was doing was exposing the plans of the deep state. Take down Trump's Twitter account, take down communications in North America, and then try to possibly storm the White House and physically remove Trump from office with these protests.
Right.
So Q was telling hundreds of millions of people around the world what the deep state was going to do. Once you have a covert plan that has been made public, you can't use that plan. You can't put it into operation, because if you put it into operation and somebody told the whole country and the whole world what you were going to do, and then they watch you do exactly what this guy told you, the public finds out that you actually planned this. And the deep state works in secret. The riots and the protests, right? That is meant to look organic, but it was actually orchestrated and carefully planned. If someone had put out the deep state's plan to have all these riots and all these protests in all these cities, they'd have to scrap that plan and do something else. You can't risk having the public know what your plan, that you had planned this whole thing all along. So Q, by putting out that message, effectively exposed the deep state's plan and forced them to call it off. And now they're going to have to come up with another plan. And Q just basically ripped out a couple of sheets of their playbook, threw it out there for the public to read, and then deep state was like, okay, well, screw you, we'll come up with another plan.
That's important for people to know, that Q's posts are not just for our
Not just
pleasure.
for us.
It's not just for the anons. It's not just for the general public. There are like military go codes in there.
Yep.
And there are things that we don't understand what certain words are coded to mean. And there are file names of images that might have a whole bunch of different meanings. And there are 1 year deltas and all kinds of deltas that we might not be aware of that have relevance, that are kind of being activated every day. So I have a final question here.
I didn't answer your spiritual warfare question.
Oh yeah, please go ahead. that can be the final question, because I'm very curious on that.
All right. Well, you and I both know that evil does not get a hold in society, and evil cannot advance its agendas unless it is somehow able to get the willing cooperation of people, right? So, I mean, I had a lot of experience with the demonic, doing physical healing, emotional healing, and deliverance. I'm just going to say I've had my share of experiences with demons and fallen angels. So I know that the spiritual kingdom is real, that God's angels and fallen angels and demons are real, and they are operating in the world today, primarily through various people. So demons are not able to affect the physical world unless they can somehow get control of human beings and get the human beings to do their will. And that's when Paul says in Ephesians 6 about the armor of God, and he's talking about, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places, right? Powers, principalities. He's talking about demons, and he's talking about ranks of angels, principalities and powers, okay? Spiritual forces of wickedness. Our battle is not against humans. Our battle is against the demons and the angels who are controlling world systems, controlling academia, Hollywood, corporate life, political realms, right? There are fallen angels that exert influence over aspects of society, and there are demons that exert influence over humans, right? Now, when you see some person on social media, cursing, swearing, screaming, ranting, and raving at President Trump, that person is under demonic influence, right? You shouldn't actually be going and attacking them. You should be praying for them to be set free of the demonic influence. Good point, Dave. Because they're under the influence of a demon, right? And if they were to get set free, emotionally healed, and set free of that demonic influence, they would be a normal, rational person, right? So when Paul says our spiritual warfare is not against flesh and blood, it's against the spiritual guys that are doing the controlling. Same thing in spiritual warfare. I have a lot of friends who are intercessors. I'm not an intercessor, but I have friends who are. They do a lot of spiritual warfare. They do warfare in the heavenly realms. They go and they're doing battles with demonic beings, fallen angels, principalities, powers, and all that stuff. Going to the courts of heaven, doing all this stuff. It's interesting because I write about this subject and I have a fair amount of knowledge about it. Some of it's firsthand, some is secondhand, but I am not engaged in that type of warfare right now. I have hundreds of friends who are engaged in that kind of warfare. And they're actually the ones that are making the difference. Um, I'm glad there are people on social media, on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, who are doing videos and putting out messages and trying to put out the correct message and do that type of warfare, information warfare. But the people who are making the biggest difference are actually the intercessors who are doing the warfare against the realms of the principalities, powers of darkness in the spiritual realm. I get reports from those people. They message me and they tell me what they're seeing, what they're doing, what's happening in the spiritual realm. One of these days, pretty soon, I have to do a podcast with a friend of mine. His name is David Murray. He lives in New York. He is a major intercessor. He's unknown. Hardly anybody knows the guy. But he and I talk pretty regularly and about what he sees in the spiritual realm going on. And it's crazy because I'll be looking at Q posts and I'll be following the president, looking at what's happening in Congress, FBI, DOJ, what's going on kind of on the ground level. And I'll talk with David and he'll be telling me what he's seeing in the spirit. And it just matches up so well. Like he has eyes on of what's happening in the spiritual world. And I have eyes on of what's happening in the natural world. And they always are tracking with each other pretty well. It's amazing to talk to people who are really effective at spiritual warfare and intercession. Their war stories are fascinating, and it's confirmation for people like me that we're doing the right things and they're doing the right things, and we're partnering, and we're accomplishing the goal. I think, you know, when Q talks about the Great Awakening, and the president tweeted about it this morning, reawakening of America. That is, that's God's plan with all of this thing. God is using humans to bring about an intellectual awakening, right? So sort of like the Enlightenment period, but we're going to go through this intellectual awakening, this intellectual awareness of the pervasiveness of evil and corruption in our society, the fact that we've let it propagate for the last couple hundred years. And when society as a whole wakes up around the world, the intellectual awakening is going to cause a spiritual awakening. Because if you look at history, spiritual awakenings happen when mankind is convicted of sin, and then the Holy Spirit comes in, right? Jesus said, Holy Spirit, he will come and convict the world of sin, righteousness, and judgment. So the work of the Holy Spirit in the life of the person, especially during revival, spiritual revival, typically the Holy Spirit will come and he will reveal himself to people who don't know him. There's a lot of atheists, a lot of agnostics, and a lot of other people out there with belief systems who do not know the Lord. And they are about to, because when all of this evil is exposed in Hollywood and the politicians, and these people are going to be going to prison for horrendous crimes, a lot of average people are going to look at their heroes going to prison and realize, wow, I can't believe that these people were like that evil, that wicked, that horrible, right? Q keeps on telling us that you can't imagine the level of evil that these people are engaged in. Well, the world is about to find out the level of evil that has been perpetrated by these people. And when you observe someone else's sin and their evil, it can make you then look at yourself.
Yeah, of course. We're in a way,
realize,
all of us are
I'm a sinner
complicit.
too. I'm not exactly perfect
Sure.
here.
We watched those movies and
right.
glorified those heroes, and so
Right.
we were kind of connected, and
right,
so
because
I can see why that would convict people of sin.
all these Hollywood stars and the recording artists and the athletes, when you find out what those people were involved in, and you were supporting them and going to their concerts and wearing their jerseys, you're going to want to just burn all that stuff. And it's going to make you think, wow, I was so blind. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. I don't know God, but I know God, he must have had something to do with this. People are going to have and encounters with God, like on a worldwide basis. We're going to see a massive global spiritual awakening on the backside of the intellectual awakening.
I completely agree. That's one of the things that brought me closer to God, is actually acknowledging the spiritual world, like you talked about. If the spiritual world is real and there's negativity and demons, well, that also means that there's a positive spiritual world, and there's a hierarchy. And so once you start exploring that hierarchy, it leads you straight to the throne of God.
It kind of does.
So, but I'm really happy that we ended the interview on this note, because a lot of people in the Q community are like, they have their ropes and they're ready to hang people. And that feeling of vengeance is so strong, which is a really negative, sinful thing.
It
And
is.
I really am happy that we could end this on a note of like praying for our enemies and having reconciliation. I think that's a good spirit. So
I agree. It's
thank,
look,
yeah,
the way that we are going to change their minds is to love them unconditionally.
yes,
Love is the most powerful force in the universe. And if you want to change somebody else's mind, change your perspective, just show them love.
yes.
And your love will break through all the mental programming that they've had over their life that makes them think the way they do.
There's no better way to wake someone up than to love them unconditionally as they persecute you.
Yep.
Thank you for your time, Dave. Where can people go to learn more about you?
Alrighty. Well, for now, I'm on Twitter. For now, I'm also on YouTube. I did create a Parler account a couple weeks ago. I'm on Parler. But any of those platforms could be gone at any time. So the best place to find me is on prayingmedic.com. That's my website. All my videos, my articles, my podcasts can be found on prayingmedic.com. And you can also find my books on Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Perfect, Dave. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir. Good talking to you.